The Texans offense returns to form after the bye week, and not in a good way, in Seattle. We're going to talk about that and more on this edition of the Bullpen.
To throw the punches off. He floats one wide open, and there he goes. Touchdown! For a Texan touchdown.
Hello and welcome to the Bullpen. As always, I'm James Roy, and with me is Tom Chavarria. Tom, how are you doing?
I've been better, James. I've been better. This has been a long, suck. Like I can't get to the next game fast enough, and you know we're some time removed from the game itself, and it just sucks. It just thinks it's not good, and we're gonna get into it. We're gonna talk about it. There's plenty to talk about, but you know I've been better.
Yeah, and for me particularly, like I'm going to be at the next game. And so I was kind of hoping that a win on Monday Night Football would get a little momentum going into a good matchup with the 49ers, who we'll talk about that in our preview, but I still hadn't really figured out how I feel about that matchup, even with what's happened here. I mean, obviously I don't feel good about it, but the 49ers are in and of themselves a whole nother thing to talk about. But it was a little frustrating of a matchup. I felt like it was frustrating from front to back. And what I'll say before we really get into it is that's what I tweeted right after the game, was like a thoroughly frustrating match from start to finish. And someone replied, well, that's because you had expectations. And it's like, to be clear, you don't, whether you have expectations or not, that was a frustrating showing of football. You could expect nothing from this team, and that was very much below the level of nothing on offense. So, but we'll break it down. As always, we'll start with positives and negatives. I reckon we'll start with negatives, really, because that's what we have the most of. But I'll give it to you first, Tom, and hopefully you don't steal my positive because there's so few of them.
I mean, there were some players that had really good games. You know, like lost in all of this. You know, there were a couple guys that I hope we see more of. Jalen Noel had a really good game. I hope we see more of Jalen Noel. Like, I know Braxton Berrios came back, and you know he had a really good camp, and you know he kind of injury kind of caught him, and who knows, but at the time we had already had some tape on Noel, and I thought that was going to be all right. Higgins, Noel, we're going to get more of them. This is the new norm until Kirk gets back. You know, this is how it's going to go. And then it was Berrios, and by the time they got to Noel, it was too late. So I hope we see more of Jalen Noel. Tommy Togiai, I hope we see more of him. Really, really like the game he played. You know, dude doesn't, you know, he's not super flashy, but he makes plays. He makes plays. You know, there was some good plays on defense from some guys that you know probably don't get a lot of love. You know, MJ Stewart had a really good play. MJ Stewart's normally a guy we like to bag on. Had a really good play. That's about as far as I want to go. Like positives. I think Woody Marks. You could kind of say he was a positive. For all the talk that we had about getting more Woody Marks, some of the stuff that he did not do well would make me understand why they don't play him as much. You know, there were a couple plays in the game where he looked totally lost, totally out of position, and can't do that. I mean, I get it. It's growing pains of a rookie. I get it. But, you know, this team, like you said, there's some expectations. So when you have expectations, you don't want to deal with growing pains. And that'll segue into the offense coordinator stuff. You know, I think negatives. Well, there were more negatives than I care to break down. You know, I really feel like this team, the defense did what they're supposed to do eventually, but I think they got off to a really slow start. I mean, they had a 3-and-out. And then, and it's not fair. To be very clear, it's not fair what this Texan team is asking of this defense. I tweeted out during the game, I feel really bad for this defense because they're asking this defense to be another level to overcome the deficiencies on offense. And it's just not fair. No other team in the league for me that has aspirations of being a playoff team is asking this much from one side of the football. I at least to me, I could be wrong. There could be other super fans or podcaster guys that are, oh no, we're here in Pittsburgh, we do that. I don't know. I'm just spitballing, but the negatives are kind of what they've been for a long period of the season. There's an offensive line that people want to talk very highly of when they play well, and I just don't see it. It didn't matter who it was. Guys like to point at fingers at one guy. The whole line was bad. I mean, there were plays in this game. You could pick on whoever you wanted to. Titus Howard, you could pick on him. Ursary, you could pick on him. Andrews, you could pick on him. Ingram, you could pick on him. A lot of what I got from doing another post game was, people are fed up with discipline issues. People are fed up with penalties. And for me, I truly believe that penalties are a part of the game and teams have them, and good teams have penalties. It's not like, oh well, good teams don't have penalties. That's not true. But when they happen, how they happen, some of the basic things that the Texans need to execute. These are negatives that I don't know if they can overcome.
Yeah, it's a systematic issue that in my opinion, I feel like the issues with the offense are so insurmountable that when I trace back how you go about fixing it, obviously the Texans have stated, D'Amico said today that they're sticking with Nick Caley, so that change isn't happening. And I still haven't really shifted to the camp that that's the right move. I don't think I'd hate it if it happened, but I just don't like doing my logic, tracing out the logic of what makes sense for this Texans team right now. The best option they have is for Nick Caley to figure it out, because someone else coming in and installing a new offensive scheme just feels like it could work. Like that's why there is reason to believe that change could be warranted, but they're not going to do it right now. If they wait too long, there's no point in doing it. But looking back, just to get through the positives and negatives discussion, you brought up Woody Marks. I felt like his usage was weird. They spoke to how they want to play the hot hand and put in the guy that they like the best. This felt like a Nick Chubb game, just, looking at it from the onset, understanding how outmatched the Texans offensive line was going to be. I thought that they would have leaned more on Nick Chubb because he's the veteran. It's actually the one position on the field where they didn't lean on a veteran, where I thought it was warranted. And so I'll speak to a negative first, and it kind of traces from your positive of Jalen Noel, which is that Jalen Noel, as good as he did, probably should have seen the field more. He got out-snapped by Braxton Berrios, who had no business out-snapping him. And also Braxton Berrios took over punt return. There was absolutely no reason for that. I think that it's more frustrating to me because we listened, and one of the reasons that I bought into Nick Caley as an offensive coordinator was the way that he spoke to adaptability and adjustments, and we're not going to be a team that just does what we do and bangs our head against the wall until the offense works. We're going to adjust to the opponent, adjust to the moment, and at least part of that, if I'm wrong, please tell me, is observing. So week one, you trot out the veterans because you're a young offensive coordinator and you want those guys to steady the offense as it goes, and you give your younger guys opportunities. And as you see them do well, then you go, okay, well, you've earned more playtime until finally they eclipse the veteran. Well, we're at what week 7? This is the 6th game the Texans have played. So he has 5 games of material that shows that Jalen Noel is really good. Dario Gambale probably doesn't need to see the field on offense because Woody Marks has emerged enough to take away snaps from Adare because he can at least pass block and is a pass catching back. There are a lot of things like Juice Scruggs is not a great left guard, but he is playing better than Lake and Tomlinson. And we watched them shift to just Juice Scruggs right before the bye week, and then to come out and run that rotation again because you like the veteran presence of Lake and Tomlinson. the whole negative is continuing to show rookie tendencies as an offensive coordinator of, oh, well, we got to stick with our veterans. It's like, no, you have to stick with the guys that are going to win us the freaking game. And those are not the veterans. The veterans have already been usurped. There are other players on your roster that are more talented than them. And I mean, I think everyone watched the Christian Kirk news come down where he was injured and said, oh, perfect. That means that Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins will get their chance to shine even more. And so it was really a slap in the face, I think, to be like, oh, Braxton Berrios, who behind Jalen Noel has been a healthy and active when he's been healthy, is now good enough to come in as an active, come in his first game active as a Texan and take over for Jalen Noel. Just a huge negative to me. It very much puts me, it's hard. I don't think there's any Texans fans that are high on Nick Caley at the moment, but as someone who had reason to be, you know, I've been kind of like, we got to see it through. And I said through the bye week, we would know. And luckily they got 2 games before the bye week that showed that, you know, when the opponent isn't good, Nick Caley's play calling looks really good. Turns out when the opponent is good, you still have to look good as a play caller. But we're looking at a guy who has basically sold us snake oil all off season long and has now stepped up. And when it counts, just falls back on principles that are like, if you don't know what you're doing, and you're just like observing and like, I don't know how to put it. It's like if I was to try and speak on basketball and like, I didn't play a lot of basketball. I've watched a good bit of it. I know even better because I know a good bit about basketball, but soccer, I've recently picked up soccer and I've picked up enough of the terms and phrases that if you asked me about it, I could make you think I know probably a little more than I do. But when push comes to shove, if I'm put in a room with someone with real ball knowledge and I have to go toe to toe, it's going to become very apparent that I do not know soccer. And so it's easy for Nick Caley to sound like he knows ball when we're in training camp and there's no pads on and he's just talking theory. But when it comes time to apply it and he's put up against a defensive coordinator that knows what the heck they're doing, it's gonna show really quickly that he doesn't know. And so that's been the case when he plays against a defense that doesn't have it, he can do it. But once he's tested and he actually has to come through, he can't because he doesn't have it. At least he hasn't shown it so far. I'd love to see him show it. And I still think that, like I said, I still think that's their best option, but I don't think it's likely. And then the positives is short. I mean, there's not a lot to it. And I'm glad you didn't take mine. This is, I think, the first week in a while with as few positives as we've had as Texans fans this season where I've gotten to say the positive I had in mind when the conversation started. But Dalton Schultz put up quite the game. This is probably, if we're looking at one thing to take away from Nick Caley, it's that he realized at some point that the Seahawks were refusing to cover Dalton Schultz. And he said, oh, let's keep throwing it to Dalton Schultz. And he put up like 100 yards receiving and was a very reliable target. I think he was like nine catches on 11 targets, and bailed out the Texans offense a lot of times when it looked like it was getting bleak. He was probably the only bright spot in terms of players that CJ Stroud had to target. And that's to say CJ Stroud wasn't exactly a bright spot himself. There was not very much to talk about with that offense, but I liked what I saw from Dalton Schultz. So with that, let's kind of transition into discussion. So you look at this game as a whole, you brought up discipline. I want to kind of hone in on that because there's a specific play I saw and I really want your opinion on it because I tweeted about it and then I was really quiet. I didn't really get into the replies. My opinion didn't change over the course of like watching the replay, but there was a play, Azeez Al-Shaair, it meets Sam Darnold at the sideline, hits him, you could say drove him into the ground. Listening to the audio, I mean, I didn't hear a whistle. Maybe there was a whistle. I'll let you talk first, but I'm just going to say right now, I personally don't think that, I think that Azeez Al-Shaair as a player doesn't get the benefit of the doubt on that call because of who he is, but I don't think that was, I think the call was incorrect, but I'd like to know your opinion on that unnecessary roughness penalty.
I'm not an Office guy. I never watched the show. I know that's going to be like, what But you know that one meme where the guy's like, "Thank you." I totally agree. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. 110%. You know, he makes the tackle inbounds. He rides him out of bounds, and then he puts him on the ground. If that's anyone else other than Azeez Al-Shaair, it's probably not a penalty. I think he has a reputation, and I think that's why he got a penalty. I really do. And to further, my case, CJ Stroud got blown up 3 or 4 different times, super late.
No calls.
No whistle.
You wouldn't get anything.
And you're gonna tell me, well, we're protecting the quarterback. No. And if you told me that he made the tackle out of bounds to begin with, totally different argument. The fact that he was 2 or 3 yards inbounds when the play started, he's a runner. If that was a running back that got rode out like that, we're not talking about it. If it was a wide receiver that got we're not talking about it.
Because it's a quarterback. I mean, that's the real that more the issue than even Al-Shaair being involved.
I had a problem. I don't think it would have changed anything, but I definitely had a problem with the way this game was officiated. I felt like there were calls that were going one way that weren't going the other way. Do not think that changed the outcome to favor the Texans, but it's hard to lump on to a team that already doesn't need any more, added difficulty to try to get a dub. And for me, I thought D'Amico's body language was pretty, because they panned over to him a lot, and I don't think he was really upset with Azeez on that. I don't know how you play defense in this league anymore, where it's so subjective. And for me, I get it. Protect Darnold. Darnold, hey, here's a novel idea. Run out of bounds. Then you don't get hit. The fact that he stayed in bounds to take the shot, I shouldn't hear. And if you told me that Azeez took his crown and dug it into his chest or something like that, definitely warranted. I don't think it was malicious. I think he was completing the tackle, what you teach guys to do. How many different games have we seen where a guy doesn't complete the tackle, dude bounces off, and he gets 5 more yards? Or Mahomes tap dances the sideline because he knows you can't hit me, I'm going to get a penalty. And then he gets 10 more yards out of the deal because he knows he's got the advantage of a favorable, questionable whistle if anything gets a little touchy. So I want to see those guys make the play.
I agree with you. I think that it plays in, the fact that he's a quarterback leads to what my frustration is with the play, but also leads to why the play was called that way. I mean, looking at because at first, I saw the play live and I said, wow, so Azeez Al-Shaair was penalized for completing a tackle. That was the exact phrasing that I used. And a lot of people, and I think that Texans fans are now conditioned to feel like Azeez deserves these penalties because of the way everyone in the league talks about him, because it was very few people that agreed with me on that. I felt like I was an outsider with that take. But I watched the replay and sure, Sam Darnold is drifting towards the sideline. He's not clearly running out of bounds. And all it takes is for him to plant his left foot right by the sideline and cut in. And Azeez Al-Shaair looks like an idiot. And we're talking about why is Al-Shaair giving up 10 yards on this play, because it goes from a tackle out of bounds to first down. But instead, Azeez meets him very reasonably. This is like a bang football play. And then with no whistle and with no way of knowing, it's not like Azeez is looking where he knows where he's at on the field when he makes that hit. He doesn't know where he's at on the field once he's taken by momentum wherever he's going. So he has only one choice in his head, which is to finish the play. If the refs did not blow the whistle, then that he has reason to believe the play is still active. And so he has reason to believe that he should take the runner to the ground. If it's not a quarterback, they don't throw that flag. That's simply put. And so I'm glad you agree with me. I was worried that we might actually have to debate that, because I felt like I was going insane believing that Azeez Al-Shaair should not have been penalized for that. But we'll move on from that. There's not a lot to talk about with the defense. I felt like the defense did a really good job. I don't think the scoreboard reflects how the defense played. I think we're entering an era of Texans defense where, sure, the Seahawks rushed for a lot of yards. There was a lot of really good passing plays. But if you look at the score, I think a lot of that was driven by field position, where the offense left the defense to kind of flounder. Going forward on 4th and 1 at your own 40, and then leaving the offense there. Like there's a couple of things that kind of set the defense up poorly. And to be fair, the defense, I think a testament to the defense is that game could have very easily been way further out of reach. People were like, oh, dude, it was 27-12 when the Texans scored that touchdown to bring it within one score. And I was like, yeah, it could have very easily been a 30-point game at that point. There was 2 near safeties that the offense got lucky didn't get called safeties. There was quite a few plays, boneheaded plays, where the offense gave the Seahawks the ball in really disadvantageous field position, and the Seahawks settled for a field goal or didn't score. So like the defense stepped up in a big way, and I don't think it would show. I think that's reason to believe why that the score. Normally, I would say that this score being as close as it was not indicative of how the game went, and I still kind of feel that way. But I do feel like it is indicative of how the defense did to keep it within reach to that point. But I think what we really need to talk about and continue to focus on is offense. So there's a couple more points to get with that. And one of those is CJ Stroud. So I need to clarify this, because I feel like everyone needs to clarify where they stand on CJ Stroud before they speak on how he performed. Because if you just talk about how bad he did, people think you don't want him to be your quarterback or anything. I think CJ had a bad game, but I think that it's all CJ's fault and that we need to get rid of CJ? No. This reminds me of a talking point that I brought up. So here's how I want to approach this question with you. I brought it up on Bleacher Report a while back that I think that the way CJ Stroud is playing is probably more of an indictment on the Texans' ability to re-sign him than it is his ability to garner the want to from the Texans to re-sign him. I think that because there's reason to believe that a lot of the fault lies outside of him, he has his own fault in this. But because there are other teams, I compare it to Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones. Those are guys that are really skilled quarterbacks that got drafted into really bad positions. And then when they managed to get out, Darnold had to bounce to a few teams. But once they found a team that had a really good offense with a really great offensive mind, they managed to play really good football. Daniel Jones, whether you want to believe it or not, I know the level of competition the Colts have faced is in question. There is no questioning that offense is humming, because Shane Steichen is a really good mind, and Daniel Jones has always been at least a serviceable quarterback. There's a reason he was drafted in the first round, but he was drafted to a team that for one season had the tools he needed, and then the next season didn't, after they signed him to his extension. So all that long-winded talk to say, CJ's performance in this lens, how do you think it affects the Texans' ability to re-sign him moving forward? Do you think that's because next offseason he will be in the first offseason where he can negotiate an extension? Do you think that the Texans are putting him in such a bad spot that he might not want to resign? Or do you think that it more lies on CJ producing so the Texans can be incentivized to resign him?
I don't know how we got to this question. I mean, that's a little wild for me. I don't think CJ would tell you like he's thinking about any of that. I think first and foremost would be the Texans, right? Like this is the place he got drafted. This is where he's been. Like I kind of feel like you would have to see different like body language. You would have to see, different mannerisms, post game, stuff like that, where he basically distanced himself from the team to think like, oh, he's checked out. Cause that's kind of how you kind of like, the lens you kind of put on it. I don't think CJ's checked out. I think he's just tired of not being protected. Like it's frustrating to be back there and just, one, take the punishment, but two, have to try to, make do with what he has. But I don't think the Texans are doing anything other than trying to do what they think is the best thing for CJ Stroud. Like, I don't think there's any back channel. Well, if he plays poorly, we'll be able to sign him cheaper, and then we can really build around him after the fact, after we get him signed. I don't think there's any of that going on. I think they're as upset as we are about these games. I think CJ wants better. I think the Texans want better, and it starts at the top. I think there's a better chance that you lose Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans than you lose CJ Stroud. Like that's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel you on that. I think if anything, this season could force the Texans to move the timeline back for re-signing him because he does have more seasons left on his contract. He doesn't have to sign an extension this offseason. It's like not, it's typical. If CJ and the Texans offense is humming right now, we're talking about how much they're signing for. And I think what the question really comes down to is this, because when you extend a quarterback, barring it being like, Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones, I think, are in more prove-it situations, but it's very rare that quarterbacks are in that situation. The typical progression is you play out your rookie contract, and then the team you're playing for has to decide, are we comfortable resetting the quarterback market? Do we think we want to offer him a little less, kind of put him in the realm of resetting the quarterback market, or do we not want to re-sign him? Because that's what it's going to be. CJ Stroud at the end of his rookie contract, with what he's done, rookie season is a while ago, but it still happened. And, I don't think he's done poorly enough to not warrant at least getting a decent contract. The question will become if those two parties meet at the same conclusion, because if the Texans meet at, well, we don't want to reset the quarterback market. We think that we can pay you $60 million a year, but right now the quarterback market's at $65 million a year. And if the Texans come in at that and CJ doesn't like, and CJ's agent also plays a big part in this because he's also under, is it Clutch Sports? Yeah, it's Clutch Sports, which is known. That agent was Deshaun Watson's agent, known to be an issue. I can't remember his name, but it's a very well-known name. And so if they decide that $5 million a year is enough to be like, no, we want to go somewhere else, there's already talk. These are the reason I bring this up is that other people are talking about it. I mean, I think I like to think that I came up with this as an original thought first, but I'm almost certain that Texans Jacob was the first person to bring this up when I go back in my mind's eye and try and think about it. But the number one destination that is brought up is that, the Rams are on Matt Stafford, and they've been talking about order of succession for him. So the discussion is that, if CJ and the offense turn it around, if they get the right people around him and he plays at a high level, it's easy. You reset the quarterback market, you keep CJ here. But we look at other quarterbacks like Trevor Lawrence, where the Jaguars got enough of an impression to reset the quarterback market with him. And now Trevor Lawrence is making a lot of money and he's not playing good enough quarterback to be being paid what he's being paid. The Jaguars are stuck in, we paid a lot of money for this guy, so we have to keep him. But, but could we improve? Maybe. I mean, but there's no certainty to that. So that's the quarterback market is so weird like that. Like you basically decide, am I going to reset the market for this guy? Can I convince this guy that he's not worth resetting the market, but I really want to keep him and pay him just a little less than that? Or we have to start over. We have to blow it all up and we have to go into the draft and find another quarterback or sign a journeyman until we get good draft position to get another quarterback. Like that's the plight. And so I think the Texans don't want to do that. I think that no team wants to blow it up. You have a guy in your room that you have confidence in, so you don't want to move on from him. But the thought process stands that if the Texans and CJ Stroud are ships passing in the night when it comes to where they're at, and CJ's like, I want to reset the market, and the Texans are like, well, we will do this, and that's all we'll do, then and CJ decides he's not going to sign an extension, then, he pushes it to another season, and if he still doesn't sign an extension and we still don't see more convincing evidence that you should pay everything in your power to keep him on the team, then you could very well be in a situation where he leaves in free agency and signs with the Rams, is what I think a lot of people are viewing as the very clear situation, because it's LA, it's where he's from. Sean McVay's a great offensive mind, and the Rams are set up in a way that is more conducive to his success. So I get that, like, all these conversations you hate because they're like very super deep future, but you know me, I like to live in the hypothetical, and I think it's a conversation that's at least worth acknowledging. That there's a lot at stake with how this offense does. And that's why we'll segue into the next conversation with this. Obviously you speak your piece on what I've said before we move on, but, Nick Caserio has been mentioned as being on the hot seat. And that's because where do you go if you want to make sure this team has what it needs to make sure CJ is an easy re-signing? And that is, you go to the GM and you go, well, you told us what is what did he say? He was like, what is a need? And the way Nick Caserio was so arrogant and cocky about the way that you build a roster in the NFL all off season long, just to find that offense is severely undertooled to handle what's needed. And there's a lot of people pointing to the fact that even though it's been said that D'Amico hired the staff, there's a lot of indications in the room that make it seem really hard to believe that Nick Caserio wasn't significantly involved in the offensive staff hiring. You look at that, and as an organization, I think that the reason the conversation is worth acknowledging around CJ Stroud and where he ends up is that the Texans realistically have a year or two, because they could extend him this offseason, but they can put it off another one if they want to. But within that year or two, they need to build an offense that CJ Stroud's comfortable playing in. They need to build value in him so they feel comfortable paying him to be in that offense. And there's a lot on the line in terms of how the rest of the season and next season goes in terms of who's going to be playing quarterback in Houston. Do I think CJ doesn't want to play quarterback in Houston? I think CJ would love to spend his whole career playing quarterback for the Texans, but if the Texans aren't setting him up for success and don't build the value in him to feel like he's worth, paying, then it becomes very easy for him to go, well, Sean McVay's out in LA, Matt Stafford's at the end of his career. They will pay me the money that I think I'm worth, and I'll be in an offensive scheme that's going to, work around me and make me play really good quarterback. So, but that segues into the next question, which is that how do you feel about the Caserio hot seat conversation? Obviously, take your time with addressing what I've just said before you get to that.
There's so much here. Like the fact that people are already at this point, like we're 6 games into a season of a rookie offensive coordinator. Like the fact that people are questioning CJ Stroud, because that's basically what you're doing in a nutshell, going, well, hold on now. Maybe you're not worth top tier quarterback money. And
to clarify, I'm saying that the Texans are building an offense that creates that question. I don't question that. At this point, I still believe that CJ's worth that money, but I think the Texans situation is begging the question because they've not given him room to succeed and they're putting him in a position to fail.
There are 5 guys that when you say building an offense, we're really talking about 5 guys. We're talking about the offensive line. We're not talking about Nico. We're not talking about Chubb. We're not talking about Woody Marks. We're not talking about Schultz. You just highlighted Schultz. Like, we're not talking about these wideouts. Like, let's cut to the chase. Like, if you want to talk about the offense in terms of, well, they need to build an offense to make CJ great, it needs to be the offensive line. Bottom line. That's it. And anything else, all the other pieces, I think will fit. I think CJ fits when the offensive line fits. I think the problem that they have and the problem that they have had is that, okay, what resources do you want to allocate to that? They've just not, they've tried and failed and tried and failed. And now they're going, okay, well, maybe we can bargain bin shop. We've had this conversation numerous times and it hasn't worked. Ursary was supposedly the guy, the steal of the draft, it could work. It just needs time. Nick Caley has had 6 regular season games to be offensive coordinator. And that's enough for a lot of people to go, I never want to see him call another play again. Now, I get those people, because I wasn't for hiring a young guy, because CJ's a young guy. And I thought that he needed a voice from somebody who's been there, done that, been through the wars, instead of me and this guy. We're first timers, and we're going through the wars together first time. And people told me, no, he was under McVay. He'll be great. Just watch. I'm telling you, listen to him talk. He's amazing. And he could be. But those same people are the ones that are going, blow the whole damn thing up, get CJ out of here, get Nick out of here, just start over. Get D'Amico out of here, just start over. And I'm like, you can't do that. I mean, I guess you can. But for me, I look at the Cowboys situation, right? 2 years ago, the Cowboys, I think, were 6-10, and Dak Prescott was in the similar situation. Contract coming up, got to pay Dak. What are you going to do? And Jerry hemmed and hawed, and finally he paid Dak. And people are like, man, I don't know. Dak's not worth it. He hadn't played good. He had that injury where his ankle went one way and he went the other. Dude's not going to be any good. Fast forward, they changed some coaches, brought in wide receiver, drafted some key pieces, and now that offense is firing on all cylinders. They light everybody up. Are they a shamble on defense? Absolutely. Can anyone score on them? Absolutely. But the offense isn't the problem. Dak isn't the problem. Dak is flawless back there. Dude's got like a perfect QBR. I don't think he's thrown a pick. Like, dude's a monster. 2 years ago, they were trying to run him out of town. So I can't stress this enough. This is year 3 of CJ Stroud and 2 offensive coordinators. Like, it's a lot for anybody. I'm talking about a vet. Not a young guy, and dudes handle it with grace and this and that. Now, we as fans are absolutely like, what have you done for me lately? I need it right now. I'm not here for a rebuild. And we've had this conversation too. Go back and look at Lamar Jackson, younger years. Go back and look at Josh Allen, younger years. You could have had the same conversations about them, the same conversations about their teams. What are we doing? We can't win. We can't get over the hump. Is this the guy? Is this the guy? We just keep running into Mahomes and he keeps beating us up. We need to blow this thing up, start over. Now, one team is like, absolutely not. We're top of the AFC, one of the kings. The other one struggling a little bit. But I don't think anybody last year would have said Baltimore's not a team on the rise, on the come up. Lamar's matured. The whole team's gotten where they needed to go. I think everybody has to pump the brakes on the Texan thing and see it play out. Like, if you didn't want Caley, you're sitting great. If you wanted Caley, you kind of have to want him to succeed. Like, it's crazy the amount of people that are like, nah, screw that, start over. And these guys just don't grow on trees. I mean, yeah, I guess you can get anybody that plays Madden to be offensive coordinator, but I don't know if you saw what I loved, and I don't necessarily love this guy, but Cam Newton has a podcast. Cam Newton and I forget the quarterback's name, but they broke down how an offensive coordinator calls in a play to a quarterback.
It's Chase Daniel, I believe.
There you go. Thank you so much. So they broke that down. They've got, 25 seconds? Not even. They've got 15 seconds. They've got 15 seconds to cram as much information in that little bit before the NFL cuts the mic and you don't get to talk to them anymore. So one of the big arguments, talking points or whatever is like, okay, what plays they want to run and how come they didn't sneak and why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? And da, 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 da. And to be fair to Nick Caley, to be an offensive coordinator, when you only have 15 seconds to talk to that dude, once the timer starts, whenever that is, I mean, that's not a lot of time. We rambled way longer than that. And I'm just talking about back and forth. So the amount of time he has to formulate, okay, this play happened, he's got to be playing chess. He's got to be 3 moves ahead. Not saying that I'm not giving him a pass, but that takes time to learn to be so forward thinking with your play calling, to have 3 plays ready to queue up. Like, okay, this scenario happens, we'll go here. This scenario happens, we'll go there. You can't call a timeout every play. So while I wasn't a Nick Caley guy, I wasn't a young guy. I wanted a proven dude. We're here now. I'm rooting for him to figure it out, because you look at where we are, you fire another offensive coordinator, install another system, you really might just ruin CJ altogether, because now it's new terminology, now it's new protections, all the different stuff. And it's like, you're not making him feel comfortable. So I really hope that, Nick Caley figures it out. And I really hope that the offensive line figures it out, because it doesn't matter what Nick Caley does. if you cannot block for CJ Stroud, it does not matter what you call. There's no play you can call for let all the offensive linemen move out of the way, let all the defenders just run through. There's no play for that.
Yeah, and so, I mean, like I said earlier, I think that the Texans' best course of action is to keep Nick Caley around, at least let him see the whole season, see if it gets better. And it's their best course of action, one, because if he does figure it out, now you have your guy, and two, another guy coming in is going to have to install a whole offensive scheme. And already, I think Houston Stressens has pointed out that a lot of times people look at like CJ and are like, is he getting the scheme? But there have been plays where it feels like other players on the offense are still adjusting to the scheme, and it's causing a bit of a slowing down of things. I think Nico Collins was the player who was like a little unsure where he was supposed to be on a route, and it kind of caused a little bit of confusion. So with that, I think that's why the question of Nick Caserio being on the hot seat is, to me, yes. I think that at the end of the season, if the offense fails to succeed, last season I said root cause offensive scheme is not working, and that's true. But now we have evidence that against lesser opponents, the offensive line looks really good and plays in the scheme really well, and the Texans put up a bunch of points. So then the question is, why does it not look good against other teams? The Seattle Seahawks were one of the top 3 teams in stunts. The Texans' offensive line has shown very poorly against teams that run stunts. There was a lot of factors in terms of the way Seattle runs their defense that were working against the Texans' ability to win that game with an offense that tends to falter against high-quality defenses. How do you beat a high-quality defense? At this point, I think that my mentality is shifting away from offensive scheme issues, because a lot of people are like, it's Bobby Slowick 2.0. I'm like, we have evidence that this scheme works. We just also have evidence that when the other team outmatches us, that it doesn't work. And so then the question is, where are they outmatching us? It's in the trenches. And so, obviously Ursary had a rough game. He has been hit or miss, but I think that he can get it. And I still stand by that. I don't think tackle is really the major issue with this offensive line. It is the interior. And I think that Ed Ingram has shown really well against lesser opponents, and he has been solid against opponents that actually know what they're doing. But I do think that when you trace back what the issue is with the offensive line, you go through I go through a highlight reel in my head of Nick Caserio disregarding any questions about the way he was approaching the offensive line, disregarding what is a need, what even is that? Like that quote sticks with me so hard as I look at how the Texans approached it. And to be fair, you can look at PFF grades, you can look at how the limited amount of statistics, you can watch the film on the guys that were available that you could have potentially had instead. And the question becomes, would those guys do as well with the Texans? I don't know, but the one move that sticks out to me that could have been a huge difference for this team, given that I think the one really truly glaring hole on the offensive line that is shown regardless of the level of skill has been left guard. And I think that if you get Tate Ratledge in the draft instead of taking 2 wide receivers in that stretch of time, because Tate Ratledge was available, I would love to see Jaden Higgins do well. But I think that the way that shuffle works, if you're trying to get 2 offensive linemen in Ursary and Ratledge, is you don't pick Jaden Higgins, you take Ursary and Tate Ratledge, and then you still get Jalen Knoll. The wide receiver room, I think, suffers in that maneuver, but the real issue right now is the offensive line. And so all that to say, I think that Caserio's seat is hot, and I think that at the end of the season, if the offense can't figure it out, I don't even know if you move on from Nick Caley at the end of the season. I think that you reassess if you want to move forward with Nick Caserio, because his history of building offensive line is very much his biggest weakness. And if it's the thing you need from him, you need to figure it out, and you need to bring in a guy who has what you think it takes to build an offensive line quickly. And I'm not saying it all has to be done in one off season, but I think that there are some moves that could be made that would drastically improve this offensive line over the course of the offseason if the right person is running it. I look to like when Jim Crane fired James Click and what acted as GM for an offseason. If keeping Caserio or just kind of being asleep at the wheel this offseason could result. I'm not saying they're going to not have a GM, but like being asleep at the wheel this offseason and not taking it seriously, like serious enough to the degree that it is, because I know you don't, maybe you don't necessarily agree, but I think that CJ Stroud's future with the team is at stake with how you approach this offseason based off how this season goes. Because obviously, like you said, and like I believe, Nick Caley could figure it out, and this offense could function well enough to turn out a team that is close to a winning record or at a winning record. I think that's really the ceiling at this point. But when you come in last offseason, I applauded D'Amico Ryans for getting rid of Bobby Slowick. And I think that regardless of how you feel about Nick Caley, that was still the right move. I think that moving on from Bobby Slowick was 100% correct. I stand by that. I don't care if his replacement wasn't the right call. The getting rid of him was. And so then now you have the McNairs are now going to have the question of, is Nick Caserio who we want to trust with building an offensive line? Because that's clearly now the focal or the main issue with this Texans offense, in my opinion. I think you have something to say to that. I was looking at your face and I felt like you might have something to reply with.
I don't know how you move around and your comparison has got to be like the worst possible thing that could happen. Like, I don't think you want the McNairs trying to go out and sign offensive linemen with whoever and plug whoever you want as their advisor. If you want,
I'm not trying to say that they would move into the offseason without a GM, but I'm saying that Jim Crane was kind of asleep at the wheel to think that he could fire James Click and function as GM, and to assess what's happened so far and be like, just kind of mindlessly go, yeah, we'll let Nick Caserio have another shot at it, is, I think, the same level of move if things go the way that they're trending towards this season. And understanding Caserio's history of drafting offensive linemen, we're kind of at a position where it's like, wake up, really think about it. Like, do you want Nick Caserio to be in charge of fixing an offensive line that he's had several shots at doing and has not succeeded with? We look at his history of drafting, and the team's not even comfortable starting full-time any of the players that he's drafted outside of Ariante Arcery. And then obviously he signed Ed Ingram, so sure, and he signed Laken Tomlinson. Laken Tomlinson and Juice Scruggs are rotating with each other, and the only one of the players that he drafted, because realistically what's going to fix his offensive line is signing, which I think Caserio has somewhat shown the ability to do, as much as that was the way he went about it. Like, trading for Ed Ingram was a really good trade, but to trust him to sign or acquire through the draft offensive linemen, which I think most of what you're going to rely on is going through the draft to fix the offensive line, to trust him to do that with his history is basically to ask a blind man to see. Like, I don't have a lot of confidence that he can do it.
You said the same thing about Jalen Petrie too. The thing I will say about this is you have to build an entire team, and Caserio would probably say this too. Like, did he fail at building the offensive line? Absolutely. I think he has. I think he gambled a little bit because he spent a lot of resources in other places. He's like, all right, my wide receiver room is going to be a little bare. I'm gonna go draft some wideouts. I can't have enough secondary help. I'm gonna go draft some guys over there, and he filled out his entire roster. So you crucified the man for not being able to draft offensive linemen, and that's fair. But you also have to give him credit for all the other moves that he made on top of that. Like, can he hyper focus on offensive line this offseason maybe, as opposed to an overarching thing with the entire team? Maybe. I think that would be an easier fix than blowing the whole thing up like so many people suggest, just because they're unhappy with how the season has worked out. Now, we are just, here to watch the show. I truly think that if you want Nick Caley to succeed, you want Nick Caserio to succeed, you want D'Amico Ryans to succeed, because if one of them doesn't, well, then all of them should go. Like, I don't think you keep one and don't get rid of the other, because they're all kind of attached at the hip.
I mean, I'll say this, right? And maybe I think I've been a little off with my metaphors recently, so we'll see. I'll step out on a bridge and give it another shot. When you're at war, you want a guy, you want the guys in charge to be very war mindset. You want if a general is your guy, you're like, okay, that's the guy, Patton, Eisenhower, whoever you can think of that's been really good at war. You want that guy at the front lines telling you, hey, let's move it forward. Once the war is over, you're looking for peace. To keep a guy who only knows war in charge is basically to make yourself ill-equipped to maintain it. And I mean, to be fair, in that metaphor, since I'm really into history, Teddy Roosevelt said, speak softly, carry a big stick. There is some merit to having wartime experience and warding off war and, maintaining your military and such. But this is a football podcast, so I'm going to disregard that. And I'm just.
So who is who here? Who is who in your metaphor? I'm confused.
Who knows war? Nick Caserio comes into a situation where the Texans need everything, and he's ill-equipped, and he's scrappy, and he's making all these really smart-looking deals, stocking up late draft picks to make moves around the draft to pick up all his guys, and he's really hitting everywhere except for offensive line in the draft, and he's building a roster. The roster's built. There obviously are some things that are going to need to be changed out at the other positions, but the thing you need is offensive line to continue to let someone who has shown no ability to build offensive line through the draft be the guy who's in charge of wheeling and dealing, and he did really good when we needed someone who could get as much done as possible. He was the guy, but now we literally just need an offensive line. An offensive line is the difference between us having this conversation right now and the Texans being like 5-1. I think that you could easily put them as a 5-1 team, maybe even undefeated, with an offensive line. Like it legitimately, they've been in 1-score games in all of their losses. And if the offensive line showed up in any of those games, the Texans win those games. It's easy. So I think if Nick Caley and Cole Popovich come through and manage to put together a serviceable group by the end of the season, and then maybe the McNair's comfort level with Caserio handling one more O-lineman addition. We've spoken to it. Ed Ingram's been solid. You extend him. Jake Andrews has been solid. Really, you just need to replace left guard. Sure. If you don't like that group at all by the end of the season, do you really want the guy who put it together to be in charge of fixing it?
So the two guys you just said have been good that we should extend. Those are Caserio guys, right?
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying right now they're good. So like if at the end of the season it comes down to it and you're like, yeah, we like Jake Andrews. He's going to be our center. We want to work out a deal with Ed Ingram. Okay, keep Caserio because he should be able to put in the other guy. If we get to the end of the season and they're like, yeah, this is not working out at all, we still have to blow up and fix the offensive line. There is no universe where Nick Caserio should remain employed by the Texans to carry out that task, if it's deemed that it really is that bad. So like, I think that the discussion around is he on the hot seat? Yes. Is Nick Caserio 100% being fired by the Texans at the end of the season? I think we have to see what happens this season to know that. There's no way to make an educated guess at what Nick Caserio's future holds because there's still a lot of football left to be played. So, I mean, these are all a very hypothetical conversation. I've told you before, I live in the hypothetical. It's fun to talk about it, but at the end of the day, we need more info. We can't know the future till it happens. So
I think there's a better chance, and y'all can quote me. There's a better chance that they fire D'Amico Ryans than fire Nick Caley.
Yeah, I know there's some people that are in that camp with you. I've seen it, but I
don't agree with it. I don't agree with it. But I'm just saying, like, you look at the all the discipline, all the things that a coach gets hung out to dry for. When players don't make the plays they're supposed to make, they blame it on coaching. All I've seen and all I've heard for the last 24 hours is how coaching is a problem. And all the levels, right? So coordinator, head coach, special teams coach, all of it. Like, Kaimi Fairbairn does not kick the ball out of bounds, and people want D'Amico Ryan's head for it. And D'Amico stood in front of God and everybody and said, no, the plan was to kick the ball out of bounds. I don't know.
The plan should have been to kick the ball out of the back of the end zone, to be fair.
Either way, it doesn't matter. Whether you kick it out of bounds or just get it to where they can't return it, because whether they have it at the 40 or the 20 makes no matter, because you need to stop them in one drive.
Yeah, you have one chance. If they get a first down, it's over anyways. So
exactly. So it wouldn't matter where they were. And the fact that Kaimi Fairbairn could not execute that play, they are after D'Amico Ryan's head, and he doesn't kick a football. The Aziz play, people are saying that this is something that D'Amico allows, and it's on D'Amico. Now, if you talk about who's putting these people in, we talk about Dare, who's in charge of personnel. These are things that all rest with the head coach, because he can go, hey, hold up, stop, wait. So as much as we want to go, Nick Caserio, you're not cutting it. We don't have an offensive line. There have been mistakes made in each one of these games that probably could have impacted it so much so that they might have been able to win them had that coaching been better. And I don't like to live in that world, because I think the players got to be better, right? Mm-hmm. I'm an accountability guy. And
I agree with you. And to speak to accountability, and this last thing I'll say about it, D'Amico Ryan throughout the whole press conference stated what he said should have happened. And then at the end of it, he said, but if you want to blame anyone, it's me. This is my fault. I'm the head coach, and it's my duty and responsibility to do that. I have not, and maybe I'm wrong, right? Because maybe I haven't been paying close enough attention to what Nick Caserio says. I've not once heard Nick Caserio say, hey, we're 6 weeks into the season and the offensive line looks like this. Maybe I could have done better. Like, there's no accountability to Caserio. He's just able to walk around like an arrogant jerk all offseason telling us that we don't know anything about building rosters. And then we watch his offensive line that he's touting as, based off of science and data and best value, trot onto the field and basically step out of the way of defenders to let them attack CJ Stroud at any given moment. And we're expected to just be like, well, Caserio needs another chance. And I know it's the Texans' way. I mean, Rick, or I've been so long since I thought about him that I can't even. Rick Smith? Was it? Yeah. Had a lot of time as GM in Houston. Gary Kubiak, I got like 7 seasons before they decided to fire him. But I mean, all the time they gave him obviously resulted in really good seasons for Houston. So, but yeah, I mean, for me, I'm waiting to get some accountability from Nick, and maybe he needs the whole season to see that the way that he carried himself this offseason will probably be his demise. If things get really bad this season. Which I think is not outside of the realm of possibility. In fact, I think the trajectory of this organization as it stands is very much headed that way. They're playing a first place schedule. There's some tough matchups coming up. Like I'm not going to sit here and act like I said it before the Texans played the Ravens. I didn't think that I was going to pick them in a matchup for like most of the rest of the season. And spoiler alert, if you're looking forward to our 49ers prediction, like I'm not, as it stands, it could change between now and when we record it, but I'm not necessarily particularly fond of taking the Texans against the 49ers, and I'm going to that game. So, but yeah, any final comments before we bring this thing to a close? We feel like we thoroughly covered everything.
Yeah. This has been a hell of an episode. I think that people need to pump their brakes. I was angry too. Wasn't what we wanted to see from our team in prime time. I think that when you look at the pieces, I think there are a lot of really good pieces. Now, I do wonder how long Nico's going to be out. I know they said he had a concussion. He's got to clear that protocol. That could take a while. I don't know. And that's a big piece.
I've heard he'll be out at least this week and possibly the week following.
And it was so funny when people get on a ramble. Like, I saw people coming for Nico, like, well, this guy's always hurt. And I'm like, come on, man. Like, what do you do for that? I don't get it. I truly believe that if the Texans win a couple games, everybody's going to be singing a totally different tune.
That's how we watched it happen. So
winning fixes everything. While you say you're not going to pick them, I see pathways to them winning all the games. I really do. You turn this Seattle team over 4 times, and that's no small number. You're supposed to win those games. Now,
every team that's done that this season, except for the Texans, has won the game. So that's a common theme in Houston. We can look back to, 5 interceptions and scoring 20 plus points against the Lions and not winning. That's never happened before. The Texans are setting all of the wrong records in terms of things that have never happened before because their defense is so good and their offense is so abysmal.
But I feel like as long as you have that defense, you're always going to be in every game. This was proof of that. You're always going to be in every game. And for me, 6 games for Nick Caley is not a lot. I know people expected him to just walk in the door and blow the whistle and all the plays were just going to be perfect. And all the personnel was going to be perfect and he was going to make all the right choices. And I don't know how you can do that. I don't know anybody that can do that in their in their daily doing something new. You're going to make mistakes. I think he's made mistakes. I think we need to see him correct them, obviously. But this is a dude 3 weeks from now, the offense could look totally different because he's decided, hey, I can put CJ under center and play action more, and he looks really good when he rolls out. And Dalton Schultz is open sometimes, and Woody Marks catches the football in passing. Things that we saw in the game that we didn't get, he could go back and watch the film and go, look, I effed up. Here's how I fix it. And then go and beat some really good football teams.
I agree with you, and it's going to have to happen. I just looked at the schedule. My final comments are this. If the trend continues where the Texans play within one score of teams that are worthwhile and beat teams that are trash, this team stands to win 5 games this season. So they are going to have to at least 4 times over the course of the next few weeks win when they are in a close game, which they have yet to do this season. What do you got?
So you picked them to lose to Jacksonville? And I guess beat Tennessee.
I'm saying right now that Jacksonville is a winning team. So the only teams that are like losing teams are on a huge, I guess you could say Jacksonville, you could say 6 because they lost overseas by a lot. So, but I was just looking at I think the Cardinals and Raiders are the only 2 teams that are, and the Titans are the only 3 teams that are truly super mega trash. Should be a win for the Texans. And then outside of that, all the other teams are not bad or are actually very good. So I'd hate to see us play all of them to one score and lose every single one of them. That would be misery. But just to show the Texans are going to have to eventually play a team that's really good and win the one score games. So that's, I think, the big thing moving forward. Thanks for tuning into the bullpen. I have been James Roy, and this has been Tom Chavarria. You can find me at James Roy NFL, wherever you get your social media. Tom is Third Coast Tom on Twitter and TC Tom1 on Instagram. And we are the bullpen, the #1 veteran-run Texans podcast in the whole universe. Quick housekeeping announcement. My work schedule has changed, so until further notice, there won't be any Wednesday lives. So we'll keep you posted on when that becomes possible again. I think it's a month or so. I have to get more detail on that. But so for the time being, there will be no lives, but we will still be doing previews and recaps. So make sure you tune in. As always, stay classy, Houston, and vamos Texans. Thanks for tuning into The Bullpen, a Texans podcast. Please like, comment, subscribe, and follow along for more Texans talk from The Bullpen.